Some of them were kept here for 20 years. Often they'd be deprived of food and subjected to endless harassment from the guards.
Entonces, con la violencia de esto,
as many as 30 prisoners were kept in a cell, where there was also just one toilet.
no teníamos luz. No. El sol, cuando yo quería sol, sacaba así el brazo y me tomaba el sol hasta aquí. Así.
They used to hear the cries of the tortured from neighbouring cells. Martin himself was tortured for over a month, just for writing a book on education.
Por el hecho de haber escrito este libro, entonces ellos quemaron mis ojos con luces reflectores muy fuertes. Para castigarme los ojos. Y por haber escrito el libro, arranca las uñas, ¿verdad? Y por haber militado, por haber actuado en los sindicatos, la pierna. En fin, y para burlarse de mí, para humillarme, ellos llenan un recipiente, que el baño, llenan de materia fecal, orín y agua. Entonces me tiran allí. Y yo consumía eso.
The police recorded Martin's screams onto a cassette and played it down the telephone to his wife. They sent his blood-stained clothes to her house.
Y esa misma noche, a las 12 de la noche, la llaman y le dice: el educador subversivo ha fallecido, venga a llevar el cadáver de su marido. Entonces ella allí sufrió un infarto. Entonces ella murió de dolor.
No, dije que hay uno que insiste mucho en las tumbas.
This was the man who supervised the atrocities, the chief of the secret police, Pastor Coronel. He reported daily to President Stroessner. Thousands suffered because of him, and many died. But even after being sentenced to 25 years in prison, he's unapologetic.
Yo no soy tal, ni conozco dónde están o si existen tal cosa.
¿Nunca hubo muerte entonces en el Departamento de Investigaciones por tortura, señor coronel?
No, en el Departamento de Investigaciones no.
Pastor Coronel's name is on virtually every document. His instructions for this prisoner were typical. Do what you like with her, tear her to pieces. The archives reveal damning evidence of American cooperation with the Stroessner secret police. And there are suspicions of close links with the CIA. An American police interrogation manual was found amongst the files. There was this State Department memo, which asked for the posting of an American police technician at the Technica to be extended beyond the 6 months of the original assignment. And this is a letter dated 1976 to Pastor Coronel from the director of the FBI. It says, "I wish to thank you for the assistance you've so willingly given the FBI." The Stroessner regime, ruling over just 4 million people, was one of the top recipients of United States aid in the world. Martin Almada came to see the ambassador to ask for reparations for the U.S. role in propping up Stroessner.
Para que lleve una carta al señor Clinton, presidente de los Estados Unidos, para que se investigue la verdad. ¿Quiénes son los culpables de esta represión, de esta guerra sucia?
The press weren't allowed in, but we were told afterwards that it was an explosive meeting. The ambassador was furious at the suggestion of American complicity in torture. The embassy spokesman claimed U.S. hands were clean.
The ambassador indicated that we've seen no indication whatever that any American official was involved in the abuses associated with the previous government or the office of that government known locally here as the Technica.
But were the Americans not aware of the torture that was going on?
We haven't seen any indication of that at all right now, and that's all I'll have to say.
There was close communication, wasn't there, between the Americans and the Stroessner government?
There was communication between governments, but the United States had nothing whatever to do with the Technica. The only...
But the United States officials actually visited the Technica.
I really couldn't say who visited where. I know that there was, from the 60s until the early 70s, a police training program, but that involved conventional police techniques and had nothing whatsoever to do with any of the abuses which the local media have reported in recent months. Thank you.
Everyone is papering over the past. Today at the police station, they're learning to enforce justice instead of tyranny. But the new chief of police defends his men. He says they were, after all, only acting according to the law at the time. But was it legal to actually torture the opposition?
Tortura no, pero sí, había una ley que reprimía eso.
Why was it allowed for the police force to be involved in torture? Was it really necessary? Police chiefs in Paraguay aren't used to being asked about torture. But now, more image-conscious, he wanted to get the correct official line on the past.
Bueno, vamos a aclarar. En ese entonces, la dependencia dentro del cual se tiene evidencia o se tiene, digamos, la supuesta evidencia de tortura, era una dependencia política, la policía política, y no la policía profesional. Y ahora eso desapareció.
All Paraguay's institutions are having to convert themselves to the new orthodoxy, including the Catholic Church. It was divided under Stroessner. Some priests condemned torture and used church services to criticize the government. But others abused their position to provide information to the regime. The archives reveal at least one bishop reported directly to the secret police chief. Bishop Aquino of Cacupe is still presiding over his flock and still helping the government. But President Rodriguez doesn't want too many recriminations. He prefers to forget about the uncomfortable truths of the past.
Yo apenas tenía algunos conocimientos que realmente algunas personas han sido muchas veces detenidas y han pasado por a veces por la justicia, y en el campo de la justicia nosotros no teníamos absolutamente ninguna intromisión, digamos. Es por eso que no sabría contestarle el por qué, que a pesar de que no sean comunistas en aquel régimen, han sido librados a ese método de que se le presionaba para decir algunas informaciones que sabían.
But disturbing evidence from the old regime keeps emerging. Documents leaked from the military archives reveal $700 million worth of covert arms deals between 1980 and 1984. The deals included American F-4 fighter planes, helicopters and tanks, Italian mines, and ammunition from Greece, all ordered for the Paraguayan armed forces. But there's no trace of them in Paraguay. The Army's tanks, like much of its equipment, date from World War II. So where did the arms end up? documents show Paraguay was being used to break international boycotts against countries like Iran and South Africa. The leaked documents provide a rare insight into the way the illegal arms trade operates. Western arms exporters who wanted to break international embargoes could launder their deals here. It was easy. The military dictatorship in Paraguay would do anything for money. This was how it was done. The government issued false end-use certificates. These allowed countries to pretend to sell to Paraguay when the arms were destined for somewhere else. The Joint Chief of Staff, General Secretos Davalos, signed them all. Like this one, issued in September 1983. It guarantees that 23 American F-4E fighter planes would be based in Paraguay for the defense and security of our territory against all foreign belligerents. But there's certainly no sign of $100 million worth of F-4s in the Paraguayan Air Force. The most modern aircraft are Brazilian-made Tucanos and Chavantes, all 70s vintage. There are only 17 operational planes in the Air Force. The 23 F-4s must have been paid for by somebody else and destined for another Air Force. At the time, F-4s were highly advanced fighter aircraft. Iran desperately needed them for the war with Iraq. American-built, they couldn't be sold anywhere in the world without the nod of the State Department in Washington. Kindrib, a London-based company, brokered the F-4 deal for the Ministry of Defense in Iran. Kindrib was set up just a year before, in 1982. It had an accommodation address at 47 Brunswick Place in London. Payment for the planes was made through the National Westminster Bank in the city. Kindrib's director was a Swiss called Jean-Pierre Delanne, and the company was dissolved in 1987. The contact in Paraguay was Gustavo Saba. His commission for the deal was $2,800,000. Saba is the son-in-law of General, now President, Rodriguez. Saba's admitted that he began negotiations with Kindrib in 1983, but he says he pulled out when told he wasn't to get the commissions he had been offered. His lawyer says Saba only took part in the commercial side of the trade, and arms dealing is not illegal.
Y lo que se le puede imputar, sinceramente se lo digo al señor Saba, es haber participado de actos preparatorios, pero él se abrió de esta negociación antes de su consumación, y eso es lo importante.
Gustavo Saba said he decided to drop out of the deal at the beginning of 1984. But there's a note from G on the 20th of March to the Paraguayan Chief of Staff. It says, the papers supplied by you have been accepted by the State Department, and the planes have all already left the United States, that is, to Iran. The payment of our part will be made upon the delivery of the first 5. Then, on the 4th of April, there's a telex to Saba from the director of Kindrib, who was by then at the Sheraton Hotel in Tehran. It confirms payment to Mr. Saba immediately after the first delivery, and says, the first 5 units are being inspected. In other words, the deal went through, but President Rodriguez dismisses all this evidence.
Yo no tengo ningún conocimiento de eso, ni tampoco existen documentaciones reales de que se ha verificado ese, esa operación de venta en forma triangular a través del Paraguay.
The ABC newspaper was closed for 5 years under Stroessner. It's been investigating the arms deals. The owner, Aldo Zucalillo, is confident the documents are genuine and the deal was completed.
I think that all this international weapon exchange took place. Not only this, through Paraguay, there may have been a lot more.